If you ever find yourself on a jury that must decide the fate of the person on trial, you might find yourself racked with doubt and overwhelmed by responsibility, even if the feeling lasts a moment. This could be especially true if the defendant is charged with the heinous crime of murder and their future is in your hands. If you felt unsure of the evidence or lacked the faith in your own judgment, would you look for a sign from the great beyond? If so, you wouldn't be the first. On February 10, 1993, Harry Fuller, 45, and his wife Nicola Fuller, 27, were shot and killed in their cottage in Wadhurst, East Sussex. Harry, a car dealer who was known for flashing his wealth and dealing in cash, had married Nicola just 5 months earlier. The killer, an insurance broker, had apparently set up the crime by tricking Harry into holding a large sum of money at his home, then stopping by to steal it. After Harry opened the front door, he turned around. The broker shot him once in the back at point-blank range. Then, seeing Nicola, proceeded to shoot her 3 times, shattering her jaw. Somehow, Nicola managed to crawl to the phone and call for help, but because her tongue was severed, she could barely speak. The operator believed that the kids were calling in a prank, and before Nicola could make another sound, the killer draped a quilt over her head and shot her in the face. Hours later, Nicola's parents, Michael and Barbara Johnson, both aged 62, became worried when Barbara tried to call Nicola at work and realized she hadn't come in. After contacting Michael, the couple contacted the police. They all paid a visit to the cottage, only to discover that their daughter and son-in-law had been killed in the most brutal fashion. Barbara said, "We got to Wadhurst and her car was in the car park. We could see her keys and bag were on the table at the back door. Between the lounge and the kitchen, there was a utility room, and there was Harry's feet sticking out from the door." Michael added, "A police officer had gone upstairs and called me up. There was Nikki." Barbara continued, "It was like watching a film, only I was involved in it." It didn't take long for the police to find their suspect. Although Stephen Young, age 35, was a seemingly upstanding father of 2, he had run up over £100,000 in business and personal debts. With his creditors hot on his heels, he had to come up with some cash quickly, so he made Harry Fuller his target. On the night of February 9th, Stephen had called Harry at the cottage, and they agreed to meet there the next morning. Unfortunately for Stephen, the call had been recorded, and a bank security camera had filmed his car coming and going from town in the space of an hour. Soon after the Fullers' murder became public, the Crime Watch television program featured the case and played a tape of the call.
I popped over last night to see you.
Initially, it wasn't long before a viewer recognized Stephen's voice and called in to make the ID. When the police caught up with Stephen Young and took him into custody, he admitted to being at the murder scene, but denied that he was the killer. Cops called Young the Iceman because he was unusually calm during the interrogation. Still, between the surveillance tape, the phone call, and Young's own admission of visiting the cottage, there was enough evidence to charge him with murder. The police discovered that Stephen had deposited £6,000 in cash into his bank account the day after the murder. The courts set up a trial date in March of 1994. After hearing statements from the prosecution and the defense, Stephen Young was convicted for the murders of Harry and Nicola Fuller. It seemed to be an open and shut case. Given the circumstances, one might easily expect that following his conviction, Stephen Young would be sentenced to life for his crimes and sent to prison. As the bereaved families of Harry and Nicola Fuller recovered from their loss, life would go on. Yet on April 19, 1994, just a month after the trial had come to a close, a strange, handwritten 3-page letter arrived at the Crown Court in Lewes, England, that threw the verdict into doubt. The letter, which was never published in full, was written by a jury member named pseudonymously as Adrian. It also included a note from Stephen Young, who asked the court to overturn his conviction. The following Sunday, the News of the World published an article with an astonishing and salacious headline: "Booze, dirty jokes, and then the Ouija board." The report claimed that the murder trial jurors who used a Ouija board before reaching their verdict held the seance after a bawdy booze-up. Apparently, Adrian, a former factory hand and the youngest of the jurors, had overheard 4 jurors talking about a drunken, late-night seance they had carried out after leaving court for the day as they deliberated the merits of the case after hours. After the verdict, Adrian's guilt kept him lying awake at night thinking about it. "I just couldn't live with myself," he said. "To me, this was a miscarriage of justice. I thought to myself, this is someone's life we're dealing with. I was astonished that these grown-up people had played this child's game." Adrian told the News of the World that during the case, he was one of 12 jurors who were sequestered at a nearby hotel. As they enjoyed dinner and drinks at the hotel's restaurant, the Old Ship, the conversation turned to the spirit world and talk of seances. He said, "I was interested to hear what they had to say, but found it funny. Those who had done it before were laughing about it, but those who hadn't were quite serious. We had a curfew of 11 p.m. and had to be in our rooms before then. I went 10 minutes early because I had 3 pints and was a bit tipsy. Another woman had a headache and went to bed early. I didn't get a good night's sleep because I drank too much and felt a bit rough, and the bed wasn't too comfortable." One of the jurors produced 2 pieces of paper and started talking about the previous night. "I overheard, and at first I couldn't believe it. They had secretly gone to one of their rooms and gone through with it. Everyone had a few to drink, and we were laughing at the girls who had too much. There was a real holiday camp atmosphere. We really needed to relax because the trial had gone on so long. There were a couple of dirty jokes told, and everyone was in a good mood." Adrian added, "What went wrong, I think, was that a few beers came into it and mouths started talking." According to Adrian's story, during the night, after dinner, 4 of the jurors had snuck out of their rooms and met up to have a secret seance. They gave themselves away when they mentioned Ouija boards at the next morning's breakfast. As the entire jury and the court's 2 bailiffs were sitting around the table, one of the jurors said, "We've done a Ouija board and got in contact with Harry and Nicola," telling his peers that after he and 3 female jurors had a few more drinks, they crafted a makeshift Ouija board from a hotel wine glass and a piece of paper, sat on the floor, and proceeded to conjure up the ghost of Harry Fuller. Each juror put a finger on the glass and asked the spirit, "Who killed you?" Letter by letter, they received the reply, "Stephen Young done it." When the jurors asked, "How?" the board spelled out, "Shot," and then continued, "Vote guilty tomorrow." The jurors agreed to keep their escapades a secret, but they couldn't help sharing their story the next morning. Not long after, the group of 12 jurors convicted Stephen Young of murder. At first, Adrian didn't care about the mischief, but after the conviction, he began to feel very uneasy that his peers had been so cavalier about the seriousness of their decision. So he wrote the court a letter. Once the news became public, it became a scandal. Shocked at the jurors' misconduct, it was obvious that the courts would have to try the case again at the Old Bailey. Stephen Young's solicitors argued that the jurors had attempted to acquire evidence beyond what was offered in court while engaging in an unorthodox and unsanctioned experiment. Since only 4 members of the jury had been involved, the rest of the jury had not been privy to the discussion or able to debate its merits. Furthermore, the defense had no opportunity to review the information, nor had a judge ruled on its admissibility. The London Court of Appeal ruled that Stephen Young must have his retrial, a decision that traumatized Nicola's parents. Barbara Johnson said, "We sat through all the hearings. He kept making out he did not do it." Michael Johnson found Young's claims of innocence and indifference to the tragic crime hard to deal with, whether Stephen was guilty or not. Michael said, 6 months after he was jailed, Songs of Praise was broadcasting from Wormwood Scrubs prison. Who was in the front row, singing and smiling? It was Young. I went berserk. We were calling the BBC and the prison governor to complain. He continued on to say, "Since then, our health has deteriorated. Barbara had a heart attack and a double heart bypass. I had a stroke. I was lucky to recover." Still, when all was said and done, the evidence presented at the appeal was strong enough to uphold Stephen Young's conviction. the recorded phone conversation between Stephen and Harry Fuller, plus the discovery of unregistered guns at Stephen's Heskett Park home, combined with an obvious motive, convinced the new jury of his guilt. The Ouija board case would appear to be a simple instance of jury fatigue gone off the rails. What on earth made the jurors decide that consulting the spirits was a good idea? Did they not want to take responsibility for sending a father to prison? Were they simply worn out from the trial and looking for an escape? In the end, most people believe that justice was served. Fortunately for the families of the victims, the appellate jury had little doubt about the strength of the evidence presented. We'll never know whether the spirits of Harry and Nicola Fuller really had any say in the matter, but we can hope that wherever they are, their souls are resting peacefully.